Well, it just rolled up on some deer. Excuse me. So I figured it would be a nice backdrop for a video. A lot of talk about the meeting between Zelensky and Trump and Vance. And some people say, we just destroyed Ukraine. Trump's on Putin's side. And I just figured I'd give you my take on it. Trump and Vance were absolutely right in beating up on the guy. We're not defending democracy in Ukraine at this point because he's canceled all the elections. He shut down newspapers. He shut down the churches. You can have opposing views in Russia. Churches are not closed down, and they do have elections. Putin won his positions. He's the king of Russia, but he won them in elections, and that's that. So if you want to talk about dictators, there's a little bit of difference between the two men. It's going to be interesting going forward because the Russia went in basically on the claim we have a treaty, and the treaty says you're not going to be in the UE, you're not going to be in NATO, and you're just going to be neutral. And now it's important to Russia because of all the gas lines and the infrastructure that Russia built in the Soviet Union era that was still being used, and supplying Western Europe. The last thing you want is for the neutral party to join, suddenly be swayed to be not so neutral as far as your resources and how they get to market. They could have started putting tariffs on all the oil, and price of oil is the price of oil. And if this is what it costs when it gets to its sale point, that's the price when it gets to the sale point. So they could literally be bleeding Russia dry. Bleeding Russia dry by, becoming part of the European Union. But they couldn't do too much about it because they're in the Union, basically industrial financial union. But then they start talking about going and joining NATO, and all of a sudden they've got the military side of it too. So they say it, and it happens. And Russia becomes a peasant nation with its resources being stolen. Like it or not, Putin does do what he says he's going to do. The reason he went into Georgia in 2012 was because, quite frankly, he said, you're not going to join. NATO's not, under treaty, NATO is not going to push right up against my border. And that vote will never take place. I will invade and take over the country before I allow this to happen. And the day before the vote by NATO to admit Georgia as a newest member, Putin rolled in with the tanks. There wasn't much resistance, and took over the country, installed a government that was friendly and neutral, and they left. And Georgia has been an independent country for the most part ever since, to the point where they did not support the Ukraine invasion. And while everybody in the Russian Republic was, supposed to get on board, they didn't. They didn't, and they didn't plan on it. They're not gonna. So that's that. The same thing would have happened with Ukraine, except the people that make a lot of money on war and crooked politicians as soon as the resistance looked like, it might be able to resist, everybody jumped on board, and we've got the mess that we've got. Russia has a huge ability. The Russian army has a huge, awesome capacity to suffer. You can see it in every war they've ever fought, and yeah, they got losses, but they keep coming. Ukraine's running out of people, running out of anybody to send there, and yeah, they got slightly better technology. The Russians are catching up. The drones, the drone is like a Gatling gun showing up on a Civil War battlefield. Nobody really knows what to do with it, so they just keep running into it and getting wiped out. It'll be interesting in the way the next battles are fought, because everything changed. Another thing to keep in mind that's on my mind is that Trump came into office saying we got to end this thing. It's too expensive. It's a disaster. I believe we spent more on Ukraine as of yet than 20 years in the Middle East of the United States fighting. And that's not really cool. And the casualties are astronomical on both sides. More casualties than we've had in, maybe since World War II. No, I think both sides have exceeded our casualties in World War II. The Russians, they haven't even scratched the surface because this is the way they fight. But the human loss is huge. Ukraine is devastated. And that's it. And then you've got the big export of Ukraine is rice, and that rice usually doesn't go to the United States. We grow, not rice, wheat. We grow our own wheat. Some places do, some places don't. Russia does. Most Ukrainian wheat goes to, from what I understand, it goes to Africa. It goes to, basically the Far East, basically poor developing countries. And we're the ones that are starving because of this war. And that's not really cool. Trump's right in trying to end it. The American people are fools, just giving blank check after blank check. So they have the big blowout in the Oval Office, last week, and Europe starts scrambling, and the English, Britain is going to put boots on the ground and planes in the sky, and Germany, and everybody's going to jump in, and they're all going to go. And isn't that what caused the war? Isn't that what caused the whole thing? Russia saying, we don't want NATO, we don't want the European Union, keep it neutral. So now you're all going to jump over there and beat up the Russians, take back the territory, and then keep fighting into Moscow. At that point, buttons start getting pushed and nuclear bombs start going off. And I hope we're not part of that. And I think Trump is trying to steer us out of it because he knows where it's going. And it's been my biggest fear that that's where we're going for quite a while. And another thing that Putin said, that why would he not make good on it, is, if Russia's going to lose the war, we'll go nuclear, because why should there be a world without a Russia in it? Well, there you go. The country's being invaded and the army's all falling back, and why not go nuclear? You lost a war. Make sure everybody suffers. If you're going to suffer, spread the suffering, share the love. So I think it's a really horrible idea that anybody talks about European armies entering Ukraine and Ukraine's defense. I think that's an absolute trigger for things to escalate into World War III. Another one is it was President Fillmore bought, I think it was Fillmore, bought Alaska from Russia for whatever, $7 million, $6, $7 million, whatever it was. And everybody said, well, you know, Fillmore's a fool. The Russians wanted to sell it because there wasn't any more beaver. They wanted to sell it because the Japanese expansion into the North Pacific, they couldn't keep it, and they didn't want to lose it to Japan, so they sold it to us. And if anything happened, Japan would have taken it from us. That's actually maybe part of it, but that's not the actual reason. The actual reason why they came to the agreement to buy Alaska was because Russia really didn't want it. But during our Civil War, one of our few allies, keep in mind that most of Europe wanted the cotton from the South to keep their mills going. So, you know, the French and the different countries, French and England, were providing weapons to the South, trying to run the blockades. We didn't have a big enough navy to stop to blockade the ports. So who came to our aid? Russia did. And when the war ended and the North had won, we owed Russia $7 million. So what they came up with, the American people will never be cool with the idea of us just handing Russia $7 million for their, for their help, for the cost of them blockading the East Coast for us. So they threw in Alaska, and we had the Alaska Purchase. I think and that ties into, I think the whole, we want Ukraine's rare earth minerals. I really think that's kind of like the same dog and pony show. Yeah, we're going to get your rare earth minerals. If there was much in the way of rare earth minerals, proven deposits, prior to the war, prior to 3 years ago, Ukraine was a pretty developed country. I mean, they had everything that we have in the United States. They had, it was first world living. I think they would have started trying to exploit their own rare earth minerals if they had enough to make it worth the while. And that's what I think. I think that it's a big smoke and mirrors thing. Yeah, I'm sure there's gas and oil. I'm sure there's stuff there. But my understanding is what Trump's plan is, if the United States is in charge of whatever is there, the mineral deposits, mineral rights, American companies will be the ones pulling, doing whatever exploration, exploitation, whatever they're going to do, American companies. And in doing so, they're going to put the economy back together using, local labor to do it. Whereas the Chinese go in with the Belt and Road and they say, hey, we're going to build a new port. And some little poor country says, wow, we could use a new port. That's great. And they're thinking about all the jobs. And then the Chinese companies come in with the Chinese labor and they basically just put the whole thing up and leave. And, the majority of wherever that spot is becomes a Chinese enclave. And but that's not how America works. We usually will bring our leadership teams, will do whatever. But like under the Marshall Plan, the majority of the work was done by the locals, and the locals made money on it, and the locals thrived in their economies, their towns, their villages, their whatever, their cities. Excuse me, got rebuilt in the process. For what I understand, the British basically have a backdoor deal that they're going to try to grab whatever resources, and it's up to the trying to trick the Americans into putting a standing peacekeeper force in there so that the British and the Europeans can pillage the country. And I think that Trump was smart enough to see through that, and that kind of led to the blowout, last week in the Oval Office. But anyway, those are things on my mind. I think it's really stupid for any NATO anybody to step foot in Ukraine, because that's the trigger that kicked off the war, just the threat of it. And now, because of new circumstances, we're going to do it anyway. Well, the trigger is there, and you're pulling it. So that's terrible. I think if you really wanted to get money out of Ukraine, we're going to rebuild your ports, and it's only going to be a United States flag ship that move the wheat. That'd be a huge moneymaker, and I mean that'd be a huge moneymaker, and it would not disrupt the Ukrainian way of life. It wouldn't be like, hey, we think there might be something in your wheat field, so we're just going to bring in the bulldozers and tear the whole fucking place up. And if it doesn't work out, we'll just push the dirt back and move on to your neighbor's place, and we'll tear that all up. I don't think that method of extraction is going to be a good idea, and I don't think that Russia would allow it. Rebuilding ports and moving wheat, with freighters without a military I think that would be completely fine. And the shipping makes money, and the wheat makes money, and I think smarter minds than mine could come up with some very easy ways to recoup money from Ukraine without stepping on Russia's toes and escalating it into World War III. But anyway, the deer walked away, so I'm going to end it. You all have a great day.